Tonight's show is sponsored by Baseball America. I do think personally it is the number one stop when it comes to all of your prospect information. They do a great job over there. All the scouting reports you could ever want. You could even go back 20 years ago and find scouting reports if that's what you're looking for. All the information on all the prospects for every single team out there. They do a fantastic job. You can use the QR code here on the screen if you are with us here on YouTube, or you can go to baseballamerica.com and you can use the code Monster30 at checkout. You get a 30% off discount on your first year subscription. I'm telling you, that's a great deal. I've been with Baseball America now for about 5 years. That's my go-to when it comes to any prospect information for my main channel on YouTube. It's a great deal. Go take advantage. Again, the code is Monster30. Now, with that said, let's get to the news here, shall we? Here we go. So John Morosi, he put out the juicy tweet today. The Red Sox and the Cardinals have had recent communication about Nolan Arenado, source says. He goes on to say, if the trade talks move forward, they could have implications for Alex Bregman's market. Of note, Cardinals executive Chaim Bloom has close knowledge of Boston's prospects. Chaim Bloom is a very big reason for why the Red Sox farm system is what it is today. If the Red Sox end up winning a championship at some point in the next 5 years, Chaim Bloom definitely deserves some of that credit. Now, taking a look here at the Bregman news. We'll get back to Arenado here in just a second, but this ties to Alex Bregman because obviously the Red Sox have been in the market for Bregman. However, it feels like at least, the feeling in the air, the tea leaves over the last week or so, it feels like those chances of landing Alex Bregman, they don't feel as good as they once did, back towards the winter meetings. Now, we've been hearing a lot of talk about the Astros as of late, right? All of a sudden, Jose Altuve said he would go out to left field to make some room for Bregman. If that meant bringing him back, you can move Paredes over to second, or, could Bregman play second? Whatever it may be, Altuve moving to the outfield could bring Bregman back into the fold. However, there hasn't really been a whole lot of movement, and we got a tweet here today from Chandler Rome. He says here, during his address at the team's annual media luncheon, Dana Brown twice spoke about Bregman in the past tense, saying once that the team lost Bregman. He did go on to say here, when asked to clarify, Dana Brown said, we're continuing to have internal conversations because he's still available. I wonder if that was a bit of a slip up from Dana Brown, right? Because, at the end of the day, even if you are out on a player, you can, per the rules with, the Players Association and whatnot, you cannot say that you're out on a player. So I wonder if maybe he kind of, goofed up a little bit there. I did go on to say here, Brown said he hasn't spoken to Scott Boras recently. Asked if Jim Crane had, Brown replied, I don't know. Jim has not told me. I'm sure Jim would have told me. Doesn't sound very good for the Astros right there. That sounds not very promising, if you ask me. You go back to Dana Brown when he made some comments during the time where Altuve was saying he would be open to going to left field. Dana Brown said the door was cracked open, but he still called it a long shot. And to me, I was starting to buy into it. I'm like, you know what? If Altuve is willing to make that move for the betterment of the team, to bring back a guy like Bregman to be an Astro for life, then hey, get it done, right? So I was thinking there, okay, you know what? Doors open. Let's make it happen. You know what? Maybe I got a little ahead of myself because, really when you think about it, is Altuve going to be good out there in left field? Second base, he hasn't been very good defensively at second base as of late in the last couple of years. So really, what would it hurt to put him out there in left field? But, with his height, is he really the best option out there? Especially when you have some better guys on the market, at least defensively. Alex Verdugo, say what you will about the bat, but defensively, he would do a much better job, than Jose Altuve. Would you rather have Altuve in left, Bregman at third? Probably. But who knows? Maybe it could end up becoming a huge problem for the Astros in left field. And then what do you do at that point if he ends up being a disaster out there? So, there was always that thought in the back of your head, could they really make it work? Now, but of course it is the Astros, right? He has that comfort, the familiarity. But, when you're seeing these comments here from Dana Brown, these comments, the ones that we saw not too long ago about it being a long shot, you do wonder if maybe the Astros are fully in it, right? However, we start getting some other news here. We got a little something from Northside Baseball. The guy that runs this blog, it is Matthew Trueblood. He runs the Twins Daily blog, Brewer Fanatic, and Northside Baseball. He's the writer and the managing editor there. And he also says here, Alex Bregman negotiations are intensifying. The Cubs have made a creative multi-year offer. When we go a little further into this article, he goes on to say that the Cubs have made a pretty competitive offer, and, there could be some opt-outs in there. It says right here, the Cubs have a creative, potentially unprecedented contract offer out to Alex Bregman. One source said, the deal is believed to be worth around $30 million annually over 4 years with multiple opt-outs. Bregman could end up with the right to opt out after any of the first 3 seasons of the deal, and the structure of the contract would be similar to the one the Cubs signed with Cody Bellinger last February. So, listen, the Cubs right now, man, I mean, you look at the situation there in Chicago, and right now you got Matt Shaw projected to be at third base. Nico Hoerner is projected to be at second base. If you bring in Alex Bregman, he goes to third, and then Matt Shaw, in my opinion, would probably slide over to second base. Well, what happens with Nico Hoerner? Well, Nico Hoerner still has some control. He's a good bat, right? A guy that gets on base, a guy that doesn't really strike out. He makes a ton of contact. He's got speed. He's good defensively. He'll definitely have some value on the market. You could move Nico Hoerner to, say, a team like the Seattle Mariners, who could use a second baseman. Even the Yankees, I hate to bring that up, but they've been looking for another infielder here. Nico Hoerner would be on the cheap, so maybe you could do something there. Maybe you could put him at third base, and maybe that's your answer. All right, so there are teams out there that could use someone like Nico Hoerner. Matt Shaw is major league ready for the Cubs. I know this is a Red Sox podcast, but whatever. We're talking about Bregman here. Now, Matt Shaw, I was actually hoping the Red Sox would draft Matt Shaw not too long ago, and the Cubs ended up getting him. But Shaw is absolutely major league ready over there. This guy, I think, has nothing else to prove in the minor leagues. He played for Team USA this offseason, and he hit very well there. To me, I think really what you need to do with Shaw is put him at the major league level, have him go through his bumps, go through his adjustments, let him get his experience at the major league level, put Bregman at third base, move Nico Hoerner in a trade. The Cubs would be very good with Alex Bregman. I'll tell you that right now. I think they would be an automatic favorite to land that division crown in the NL Central. I think that would be a slam dunk right there. The Cubs would be a very good team at that point. And another thing too, if they were to make a trade with the Yankees, the Cubs, if they're looking for pitching, maybe you could do a deal, say with Clark Schmidt or something like that. So I think Bregman would be a great fit with the Cubs if they could find a deal for Nico Hoerner. Now, for the Red Sox, right, we've all been hoping here. Can Bregman be the guy to be that right-handed bat the Red Sox have been looking for? We've gone over the reasons. There's no more reasons to go over it. We're beating a dead horse at this point. He's always hit well at Fenway. He provides that veteran leadership. He's always hit well at Fenway Park. The Green Monster would be perfect for him, right? Has that versatility. So, if you move Devers off of third base, Bregman could go to third, whatever it may be. However, people bring up, Christian Campbell, where he looks like he's ready to break down that door. Bregman, could potentially block Christian Campbell at the major league level or Marcelo Meyer, however that shakes out. Yeah, there could be some logistical problems there. I like to think that those things tend to work themselves out, but it is still there in the back of your mind, right? So for the Red Sox, right? The way I've been thinking about it is they haven't been putting their foot on the pedal because I feel like they would rather just have Bregman fall into their lap because they already have Campbell and Meyer who are ready to get to the major league level. I think personally, they would like to have Bregman, but they're not going to go out of their way to get him. If his market ends up not materializing and he says, you know what, let's go to Fenway Park. I can go there for a year. I could juice up those numbers with the monster, and then it would be, a win-win for both sides. However, I don't see the Red Sox going the extra mile to land him. If he falls in their lap, fine. But right now, of the Cubs, if they are making a competitive offer here and, they're giving him a nice AAV and they're giving him the luxury of the opt-outs, I'm starting to think the Cubs might be the destination, everybody. The Blue Jays supposedly have an offer on the table, according to some tea leaves out there. But does he want to go there? I don't know. There's another team reportedly that has a 6-year offer on the table besides the Astros. I do think personally it is the Blue Jays. But in the end, I think, the happy medium here between, the teams that are involved might be the Chicago Cubs, right? If he's making a good AAV, has the opt-outs, they're offering a 4-year deal, then that might be the best spot for him, I don't think the Red Sox are going to, all of a sudden wake up tomorrow and be like, you know what? 5-year deal with opt-outs, $30 million per year. No, I don't think the Red Sox are going to do that. Right now, I was thinking Astros for a little bit there, but now I'm starting to think the Cubs, man. I'm starting to get that feeling. We'll see what ends up happening. Now, another reason why I think the Red Sox are not going to put their foot on the pedal here is because I think that they know Nolan Arenado is just sitting there. The Cardinals obviously have made it known they want to move him. They've let that be known all offseason. There is no reason for them to keep him, right? They're going through an organizational shift here. Chaim Bloom's going to be taking over as the president of baseball operations next offseason. They got young talent that they're looking to get into the lineup to get playing time. There's no reason to keep Arenado, right? I mean, obviously he's already come out, said, hey, these are the teams I want to go to. It was reported a little while ago that he would like to go to the Red Sox. And that's what I think's going on here. I think the Red Sox think, hey, you know what? We would like Bregman, but if he ends up not coming to us, well, okay then. We got Arenado sitting right there. That's a right-handed bat who's also hit very well at Fenway Park in his career. And for the people that like to call the Red Sox cheap, which, hey, I'm not really going to argue with you. Obviously, they haven't been spending all that much money. But Arenado would be cheaper than Alex Bregman, right? Over the next few years, he's owed a little over $50 million. That's right around a $17.5 million AAV. He would be much cheaper than Bregman. He would fit into that luxury tax or under that competitive balance threshold even better, right? So that could give them a little bit more wiggle room to go after, say a David Robertson on like a 1-year, $7-8 million deal, $10 million, whatever it may be. So that's what I think. I think the Red Sox are waiting out the Alex Bregman thing. And if they don't get him, that's when they turn to St. Louis and say, hey, what do we got to do to get a deal done? And then, there have been some, reports, obviously, the Red Sox and the Cardinals, possibly have talked this offseason about him. And, kind of thinking, this is kind of what I'm thinking in my head. Maybe they called the Cardinals at one point and said, hey, what are you thinking here? Kind of what are the parameters you're looking for? How much money are you looking to eat? How much money are you not looking to eat? What prospects are you willing to talk about? Could you add on some players? I'm wondering if maybe they talked about some parameters at one point, and the Red Sox said, all right, cool, we had a good conversation. We are going to pay attention to Bregman right now. We're going to wait out that market. And if Arenado is still there by the time Bregman's off, then, we'll come back to you. We'll give you a phone call. How about you call some other teams, see what, maybe what some other teams say. But there's not really a huge market for Arenado. So maybe the Red Sox read that and said, you know what? We feel okay with the Cardinals maybe making some other phone calls, and we feel like he'll still be there even if Bregman goes to another team. And it looks like that might be happening here. Again, John Morosi. The Red Sox and Cardinals have had recent communication about Arenado. That could also tell me that maybe the Red Sox feel like, maybe another team like the Cubs are starting to make some good traction. Maybe they feel like they're working towards a deal. And maybe that's why this recent communication has come up. I've seen some people say, oh, this is a leverage play. They're trying to get Boris to come down. Well, listen, if the Cubs are out there slamming money on the table, a contract that suits Bregman, and, his it gives him flexibility for the opt-outs. I mean, is there really that much leverage to play with at this point? Who knows what the contract looks like. But, I mean, listen, that's what I think this is what's going on here. I think the Red Sox know, Bregman's pretty much, he's going to be coming off the board here soon. And they're opening up that phone line again with St. Louis. Now, the talking point with Arenado among Red Sox fans, I see it every single day. Every time I go on Twitter, the one thing I see, the bat's regressing. He's aging. He's declining. People talking about him like he's 55 years old. There's been many examples over the years of guys in their 30s where they've turned things around. Guys that have had, great careers, towards the end of their career in their 30s. Adrian Beltre being one example, right? He came to the Red Sox to turn his career around and then ended up having all these great years with the Rangers, right? That's just one example. Arenado, now, there's no denying the numbers. Obviously the slugging percentage, 394, not very good, right around a league average WRC plus at 102. The exit velocity has come down with Arenado over the last couple of years. Now, the one thing I will say with Arenado, in the second half last year, he did make some mechanical adjustments. And in the final month of the season, according to Sports Info Solutions on Fangraphs, Arenado ranked 67th out of 167 qualified players. I think I have that right, 167. Let me double check that number. 167 qualified players. He ranked 67th overall in hard hit percentage. So he did some things to kind of get that bat going a little bit more. The exit velocity increased in the second half. So that maybe that could be a good sign for the future, right? Goes into the offseason, gets back into the lab and says, all right, cool. I figured something out in the second half that helped me. Let's keep this going, right? And maybe he brings that into the 2025 season, and maybe you see a bit better numbers. And then if you put him at a friendly ballpark like Fenway Park, uses that monster to his advantage. I saw Red Sox Stats was putting out there that, his home runs would have come down. Well, yeah, because Nolan Arenado is more of a line drive hitter. So more likely he would use that monster to his advantage, right? Try to, juice up those doubles a little bit more. Maybe he could make an adjustment with the swing to where he can get a bit more loft there. But either way, I think that monster, he would use it to his advantage. Busch Stadium, I don't know, just hasn't been very kind to him going back over the last year and a half or so, a couple of years. So I think putting him at Fenway Park, I think you would see some similar results to what Mike Lowell saw back in 2006, 2007 when he won the World Series MVP for the Red Sox that year. I'm not saying it would be the same exact thing, but I think you can see a bit better production. And the Red Sox, they've done well when it comes to the position player side of things. They got a good department there. Maybe they could figure something out with him. Maybe they already see something to where, where he can get himself right. But with Arenado, the one thing that you will get is defense. One of the best defensive third basemen of all time. Still looks great out there. That was a huge problem for the Red Sox this past year. Rafael Devers, we know what he can do with the bat. Arenado's defense is by far miles better than Rafael Devers. Now, we'll talk about that in just a second. What do you do with Devers? But Arenado would give you better defense at third base, which the Red Sox sorely need. If Trevor Story is healthy, I know that's a big ask right now, but if those two were healthy for this year, that's a very good defensive, a very good left side of the infield for the defense. So I think that would be pretty solid. But another thing I want to, put into the minds here of people, Arenado is a veteran guy, right? I just want to point this out. I feel like when you look at, take a look at the young guys that are on the roster, like Tristan Casas, right? Jarren Duran, some of these younger players, they grew up watching Nolan Arenado. Nolan Arenado, I think, is a decent bet to get to the Hall of Fame one day. Arenado is one of the best players in the game. Go back to the late 2010s. And these, young guys that are coming up for the Red Sox, they grew up watching Nolan Arenado, right? They grew up, seeing what kind of a player he was, how hard of a worker he was, right? Say what you will about the numbers, but Arenado has, all the respect in the world from everyone in Major League Baseball. He works extremely hard at his craft. Sure, yeah, say what you will about the numbers, but the guy goes out there, he gives it 110% every day. I think the Red Sox could use a guy like him. And again, I think the young players on the team, they'd look at him coming through the door and they'd be like, wow, that's Nolan Arenado walking through the door, man. Man, I used to, every morning when I woke up and I put on MLB Network, ESPN to watch some highlights, Nolan Arenado was making some kind of a web gem or hitting a couple of homers in a game, So I think that goes a long way. I think it would be really good for the organization personally. And I see you in the chat, Thomas Harmon. If no Bregman, then Arenado will still greatly help the Red Sox. Low strikeout percentage. That's another big thing with Arenado. Sure, maybe those advanced metrics have come down, with the exit velocity, with the bat speed a little bit, sure. But this is a guy that still is a tough at bat, and he's going to help extend that lineup a little bit. He's going to wear down that pitcher out there. A guy that is still a pretty disciplined hitter at the end of the day. I think there's a lot of positives with Arenado. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of people out there, for the most part, what I see, you see people that, don't want anything to do with him. But I think for the most part, people would be okay with Arenado. I think what people get a little about is how do you fit him? That's what I think the big disconnect is right there. And that is a good question. What do you do with Arenado? Well, you got to figure out what to do with Devers. Do you move him to first base? Do you move him to DH? I think most people would want him to be DH. But then you kind of look at also, would that be a good spot for him mentally, right? Would that be a good spot for him, physically? Getting him out into the field, it gets him moving him around, It takes a certain a certain guy to be a DH full time, right? David Ortiz, obviously perfect example. You need to have a certain mindset, and Rafael Devers, at least at this point in his career, might benefit more from getting into the field, right? At least at this point, right? Because he's a guy, he takes pride in going out there and playing defense, right? He wants to be out there. Has he been great at third? No, but again, he's a guy that wants to be out there. Would he, mentally be okay at DH? Is that something that he would like to do? I don't know. I mean, when you look at it from the surface, you think, why not? Right? The guy just hits, Rafi scoops, DH, perfect. But does he want to do that? Now, if that is a big deal, then you got to figure out what to do with Tristan Casas at that point. I think the easy answer would be move Rafi to DH, and then you got to figure out what to do with Masataka Yoshida. It looks like he's doing pretty good. Starting to see some videos of him taking some swings out there, shoulder looking okay at this point. That was a big issue for him last year, and that actually ended up being a reason why he wasn't playing in the outfield a lot. He wasn't already a great defensive outfielder, but, that seemed to be a bit of an answer this offseason to why he wasn't really getting out there. So, but either way, with Yoshida, this is a guy who's a pretty solid hitter, right? You're not going to get a whole ton of power. I look at Andrew Benintendi with Yoshida, a guy that is going to give you around 20 homers, right? 2018 Andrew Benintendi without the speed and the defense. I think that's a good comp. But Yoshida, if Rafi were to be the DH, or if you did some kind of a part-time I don't know, to me, I don't think you do a part-time Arenado at DH. I think you play him at third every day. But you got to figure out what to do with Yoshida, right? He's owed a lot of money. He's owed over $50 million as well over the next 3 years. That's going to be hard to move that contract. There's not a lot of teams out there that, really might want to take on that contract, especially with the shoulder issues that he's been having. If there's a couple of teams, maybe the Giants feel like they could use another bat there. Possibly. Maybe the Padres. But then again, how much money are they willing to take on at this point? Payroll has been a little restricted over the last couple of years. Will they want to take on his contract? Maybe if the Red Sox eat some of it, maybe that could be something there. But, there's not a whole lot of spots, right? The Diamondbacks, they just brought back Randall Grichuk. I know that's a right-handed bat, but, still, maybe that could have been a spot. There's not a whole lot of destinations for Masataka Yoshida. Not a lot of teams, at least I think, I could be wrong, that would like to bring him in. It might be too hard to move him, right? So that's where you look at Tristan Casas. And, here's the thing with Casas, and this is not me saying that I want to trade him. This is not me saying that I want to get rid of him. I want to keep that power bat in the lineup. I want to see what this guy can do over a full season. Can he get, 30, 40 homers? I want that. I want to see it. At the end of the day, though, he has value, right? Lots of years of control, cheap, power upside, someone that I think could intrigue a lot of teams out there. So, I know a lot of people don't want to get rid of him, and I completely understand that. However, the Red Sox, they seem to be motivated for Arenado here, or either Arenado or Bregman, whatever it ends up happening. But the fact that they've opened up that communication, it looks like they could be trying to take a step forward in making a move there. But, what do you do with Casas at that point, right? And we got reports not too long ago in the past few days that the Red Sox, I think this was coming from the Seattle Times, that the Red Sox, they tried on a couple of occasions to trade Tristan Casas to the Seattle Mariners. One time for one of their young starters, Brian Wu, Bryce Miller, and then the other time with Yoshida for a possible Luis Castillo trade. So a couple of occasions they tried to move him. Who knows what, if there were some other teams that maybe got into the mix. I don't know, but whatever it is, they have tried to move him. And you might be thinking, well, why are they trying to move him? Well, I mean, obviously, they're trying to do something here, whether it's, bringing in Alex Bregman for second base or Arenado for third, right? They're trying to make some kind of a move. But if Arenado's the fallback, you have to figure out what to do here with Casas. I think most people would want to see Yoshida get moved. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is a team or two out there that would be interested in bringing him in. I'm not sure. We'll see. However, if an Arenado deal is something that can happen, I got a few ideas, right? Now, I got kind of like a tier system going here. Here's the first deal. Let's do Arenado, some cash, going to the Red Sox, enough cash to make up the difference for his underwater value. And then maybe you can just send back a couple of prospects, right? I got Juan Valera and I got Nelly Taylor. As of right now, Juan Valera is a guy that rose through the system pretty well last year, right? He is the number 14 prospect in the Red Sox system on Baseball America as of right now. And then you got Nelson Taylor or Nelly Taylor, the number 26 in their system. So maybe you could do some kind of a deal like that where just Arenado, some cash, a couple of prospects, done. But then you'd have to make some corresponding moves, whether or not that's Casas or Masataka Yoshida. And I'm going to say this right now. I still see people bringing this up. I don't see the Cardinals taking back Masataka Yoshida. They are trying to get rid of Arenado off of that roster so they can try and get some of these younger guys playing time. I don't see why they would bring in Yoshida, and he doesn't really fit very well there. is not really a lot of spots for him. So I don't see that happening, right? It would make sense from the Red Sox point of view, but you always have to look at it from both sides, right? I don't think the Cardinals would want Masataka Yoshida. Now, if you were to take it up a notch, this is what I think Red Sox fans would love. I think you would see more Red Sox fans hop on board with this idea. Arenado, and attach a player with him. How about Ryan Helsley coming along with Arenado to kind of make up that difference in the underwater contract? The Red Sox supposedly are still looking for a reliever out there. Ryan Helsley would be an amazing addition at the back end of the bullpen. Arenado and Helsley going to the Red Sox, and then you can still just send back a couple of prospects. In this deal, I got Yordany Monegro and Zach Erhard. Zach Erhard was a guy they just drafted this past year. A pretty decent-looking outfielder. And then you got Yordany Monegro. Yordany Monegro, as of right now, is the number 19 prospect in their system. Maybe you could throw in a little bit more here. If the Cardinals attached some cash with this, they would be able to get some more value. But the difference is, the big benefit here for the Cardinals is they're getting Arenado and his contract off of their payroll, and they're clearing up playing time for some of the younger guys. That's the big benefit. However, you have to remember the economics of it, right? His field performance, his field value does not match what he's getting paid, right? So in this case, attaching 1 year of Ryan Helsley, kind of helps make up that difference. So in this deal, the Cardinals, that sounds like a complete heist. It sounds ridiculous. The Cardinals giving up Arenado and Helsley for just a couple of prospects. It doesn't sound right, when you're looking at it from just the values of the players. But, again, you're looking at it from the economical point of view, the roster flexibility for the Cardinals. That would be the big benefit. Again, maybe some cash could be attached, and then they can get more out of it, right? So let's do that. Let's have the Cardinals throw in a little bit of cash here. I don't know, 10 million. Well, then you're looking pretty good here. So if you were to throw in a little bit of cash over the next 3 years, well, then you got an avenue here to where you could add a couple of guys, right? And the Red Sox, their farm system has gotten very beefed up over the last several years, right? There opens up a lot of possibilities here. Maybe you could throw in another pitching prospect, right? Maybe, Juan Valera, who I brought up a little earlier. Hunter Dobbins, I don't want to see him get moved, but, whatever. Whatever it may be. Alan Castro, maybe you could send him back. I hate to say it. I just interviewed David Sandlin not too long ago, but maybe that could be a guy that heads back there. Whatever it may be. Maybe Garcia, right? Mikey Romero even. Whatever it may be. If they add in a little bit of cash here, that's going to open up a lot more possibilities, right? The final deal that I have, if you were to attach a guy with a lot of upside with Arenado, like Ivan Herrera, maybe this could be the avenue if the Red Sox are dead set on moving Casas to make room. Maybe this could be the avenue. Arenado and Ivan Herrera, young catcher for the Cardinals. They got a lot of catching in that organization. The Red Sox, they could use an upgrade at the catcher position within their organization. They could use a little bit more upside there. Maybe Ivan Herrera could be attached with Arenado, and then you could send back Casas, right? And maybe some cash could be involved. Maybe some other prospects, could be attached as well. But this could be another avenue, I think the avenue that I would like the most would be this first deal, Arenado and some cash for a couple of prospects, and then you move Yoshida in a separate deal. I think that would be the best avenue. But again, you got to look at a couple of things. Rafi at DH, is that the best thing moving forward for him, mentally and physically, right? I've seen people out there say, oh, if you put Rafi at DH, this guy's going to gain like 30 pounds. Well, I don't know. I don't know what goes into that, right? I don't know about that. But at least the bat would be what he focuses on, right? I would like to think if he went to DH, even though he's not getting up from the bench every half inning to go out there and play in the field, I would like to think he would keep himself in some pretty good shape, right? But whatever. Again, do the Red Sox want to go that approach? I think that would be probably the best thing for everyone involved. The Red Sox get a good defensive third baseman. Yoshida, you move him in a separate deal. Rafi is your DH. You keep Casas at first base. That's what I think is the best deal. Now, if the Red Sox were to get Ivan Herrera or someone of that caliber, if not Herrera, maybe you could do one of their top pitching prospects, right? If you were to get back Casas, maybe you could get back someone like a Quinn Matthews, maybe you could do like Ryan Helsley and like Tink Hentz or something like that. Then you could be talking at that point. Giving up Casas, you don't give him up easily. If you are going to give him up, you have to get something good back for him. And Arenado is nowhere near enough. I want to make that clear because I don't want people coming after me and saying, "Oh, Robbie wants to give up Casas for Arenado." No, I don't. I would only give up Casas for Arenado and a lot of upside along with him, whether that's Herrera or you put Helsley, throw in a high-level prospect with him. That's what I would want, right? I would rather just keep Casas, rather just move Yoshida. But if that's the way it has to be, then okay. Either way, though, I think it's going to get very interesting here over the next couple of weeks. We're getting closer here to pitchers and catchers reporting. I think it could get a little busy here over the next week or so. Could be seeing the conclusion of the Bregman sweepstakes. And once that's over, let's say he goes to the Cubs, maybe back to Houston. That's going to be the Cardinals' opportunity to move Arenado because I think they don't want this guy to show up to spring training. That, I think, is something that probably sits in their head. They want to get him moved before spring training because you don't want this guy coming into spring. Right? Obviously, they probably love the guy there, but after all this trade talk all offseason, do they want this guy showing up at spring? Not because they don't like the guy, but it's just awkward, right? And it's a distraction, right? Because Arenado comes into camp, you got microphones all around Arenado. Hey, what do you think of all the trade talk this offseason? What do you think's going to happen with that? Do you think the Cardinals really want all that? No, I think they want to go into camp and probably start, trying to focus on their future here. So we'll see. I think it could get very busy over the next week. Hopefully, all of this is, not just some nothing burger. But we'll see. I do know Jared Carrabis. He pointed this out a little earlier. Let's actually go pull that up here. He actually put out a little bit of a tweet. I forgot to pull that up. Let's actually pull this up here. Hold on one second. Let me find it. I know it was in the replies. I know it was there. Where is it? Oh, here we go. We'll actually just pull up the we'll go here. All right, here we go. At ZZZ134, he asked, what are the odds the Red Sox get Bregman or Nolan at this exact moment in time? He said, I feel pretty good about them getting one. Remember, Jared, he is friends with both Alex Bregman and Nolan Arenado. Just saying. We got a couple other things here. Tommy King says, will the price be upsetting? Negative. I'm not sure. Oh, okay, that was in the same one. So he said, will the price be negative? And he said no. There was also another thing here, I believe. How loud are the streets? They're murmuring. Would the word imminent be appropriate? Too strong, in my opinion. The path is there, but imminent, too strong at the moment. We also had this. Have we ever considered the fact that the Red Sox offer may be in line with other teams and he just doesn't want to come here that bad? Someone says, why won't these people just listen? The Sox have not made an offer. And then Carabas said, no longer true, to be honest. I've been saying this. I think the Red Sox have an offer on the table for Bregman. Carlos Baerga, he reported it a couple of weeks ago. So, I see a lot of people out there saying, oh, the Red Sox, they never wanted Alex Bregman. They're not serious about him. Enough of that. Yes, they have. Right? How strongly they want him, that's the question. Right? Anyway, that's all for tonight's episode. It's going to get interesting here over the next week or so. I think Pitchers and Catchers is coming up very quick. But everyone, thank you for joining me tonight. Do appreciate that. If you can on the way out here on YouTube, hit that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new. We're trying to get to 3K by opening day. We're within a couple hundred people. I think we can definitely get there. And if you are listening to this in audio form, Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, wherever it may be, give us a good review. Give us a 5-star review. Help us out in the algorithm in the podcast world. Would really like that if you can. But everyone, go have yourself a good rest of your night. If there is any more news to report, I will be here. But until then, I'll talk to you next time.